Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neurocracy. Today, we're joined by Dr. Michael A. Grandner, a sleep scientist at the University of Arizona whose research explores how sleep and sleep-related behaviors affect cardiovascular health, metabolism, and longevity. Dr. Grandner, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, my first question for you is what initially sparked your interest in sleep science?
Um, well, I was interested in sleep science since I was a high school student. I thought
Wow.
learning about it was really cool. I got as many books as I could from the library and from the bookstore at the mall when those still existed.
Yeah.
And um, I just thought it was really fun to learn about, and I tried to work it into projects where I could. But I just didn't know it was like an actual career or anything until I was in college and working in a research lab.
Yeah. What's one book that you read about sleep that was very meaningful?
Back then, back in high school, let me think of so one in particular that I really liked. So you got to remember, I was a high school student
Yeah.
at the
I mean,
time.
I am a high school
Um,
student, so
yeah.
yeah.
Um, and so like I didn't know the difference uh, between, stuff that was more academic and not. But I
Yeah.
remember, I don't remember what the name of the book was, but
Okay.
there was a book about dreams, and I think the author was Fontana.
Okay.
Um, David Fontana, I remember. And I remember it was a book about dreams, and I remember that it went through all the different ways of understanding dreams from a
Yeah.
scientific and psychological perspective.
Yeah.
And I just remember like that really taught me the first, I remember that book in particular was one of the first where I learned about different perspectives about understanding these things.
Yeah.
And that got me into looking up some of these things and reading about them from other places.
Yeah. I will say I'm glad you actually mentioned dreams because dreams for me are one of like the most interesting
Oh
like
yeah.
abilities of the human body. It just doesn't like make sense to me how the human body is able to construct an experience like that. And then I've actually recently been having a lot of dreams for some reason. I think it's because my sleep schedule is a little messed up right now. But it's just when I wake up, I feel like it was just a real experience, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I think
your
there's
brain
also
does
like
think it's real. That's
yeah.
why in REM sleep you're paralyzed. Otherwise you'd be acting them out.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So does your research actually do anything with dreams or what? And
Not
then if it doesn't,
much, not
yeah,
much. I mean, I ask about it sometimes
yeah,
and we look at like experiences of things like nightmares
yeah,
and it's not something I've been able to really work in as much as I've always
right.
wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. So if it isn't for dreams, then what kind of questions does your research mainly focus on, and what are you trying to answer right now?
Yeah, so when I was a graduate student, the lab that I was in had published what ended up being a big landmark paper on linking how sleep experiences outside of sleep disorders in the real world were related to longevity, and where people who weren't getting the healthy amount of sleep didn't live as long. And this was a very sort of new finding. It wasn't new, it had been around since the 60s, but at the time it was sort of newly being paid attention to. And my question was, if real world sleep health is related to longevity, why and how? And how do we leverage that information to help people live better
Yeah,
longer? And that's always been what my work has been about. It's always been about how is sleep related outside, not necessarily sleep disorders, sometimes sleep disorders, but I tend not to focus on sleep disorders.
okay,
How is actual sleep health related to all the different domains of health that matter to us? And how does that bear out in terms of outcomes that matter? And then also, what are the upstream things that lead us to sleep the way that we do? What are the beliefs, attitudes, choices, and behaviors and biology and genetics, and what are all these things that lead to our sleep? But then what are the things that lead to that? The social, environmental, and
yeah,
structural factors and context that all of us exist within. Like we're not a vacuum.
yeah,
We don't exist in a vacuum. We're not an island. Um, we're not completely isolated from our environment. And what elements of the environment are important to understand that impact the individual, that then impact that person's sleep that night, which then impacts their health down the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when you mentioned structures and like structural factors, I mean the first thing that comes to my mind, because it's something I try to advocate for, is school start times.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an example of like society, and I mean it's obviously a lot of logistics, ethics, and a whole conversation in and of
Yeah,
itself.
I mean
But
there's and so we live in a society that sees sleep as a cost of time.
yeah,
Um,
I
you
agree.
know, but it's not a cost of time any more than eating is a cost of time. And we don't say things like, healthy food should be for people who've got the time. And if you're eating healthy, then that probably means you're lazy or aren't managing your time correctly. Like, we don't say things like that, but we
Yeah,
do say that around sleep, and that's not biological, that's cultural.
yeah. I will say that I think I really agree with this because I think it's sometimes like glorified to be like sleep deprived and be like, oh, I'm working so hard. I'm working these extra shifts, like I'm not getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. And also I think one of the reasons that this might be like such a widespread occurrence and it's like almost normalized to an extent in culture is because I think it's hard to see the effects sometimes because they take so long to develop. At least from what
Yeah.
I've talked about on this podcast, like some of the changes are so like deep within your like systemic like body that you wouldn't even see the effects for
Yeah,
until they overcome.
sometimes you don't. I mean, but sometimes you do, and then you
Right.
just sort of habituate to it, and where you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
you
that's
think
true.
it's normal,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, but you are impaired. I mean, so that's
Right.
the thing. When someone brags about how little sleep they get, that's like someone bragging about eating the whole pizza, where it's like, well,
Right.
I mean, I guess you were really hungry, but like that's probably not good for you.
Yeah.
That's not the best life choice you could have made right there. And also when I hear about people who feel like they're trading sleep for work to the point where they're not sleeping at least the minimum amount to be well functioning during the day, to
Yeah.
me, that's not like I don't that's not impressive to me. To
Right.
me, I see it's probably taking you an hour to do what would take me 30, 40 minutes because
Right.
I'm actually well rested and
Yeah.
prepared for the task. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not to me that I guess people, show off in that way, but to me it's just disappointing where it's like, I guess I don't want you driving my airplane,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
driving my bus,
Yeah.
because I'd rather somebody who slept well.
Yeah, yeah. And so kind of continuing on this idea, I believe one of your areas of research is, as you mentioned, like I mean, you mentioned the upstream
Yeah.
determinants of sleep behavior, but there's also like the downstream outcomes of
Yeah.
insufficient sleep. So could you talk a little bit about those? And I know we've been kind of
Yeah.
touching on that idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So, I mean, the thing is, sleep is foundational and it touches many different systems. So
yeah,
there's many different systems in the body that use sleep to accomplish important things. Usually those things have to do with regulation, and integrating experiences from the day and remodeling and preparing for experiences in the next day. And that could mean things. So usually I try and see it in six buckets, because I like the parallel three and three, where you
yeah.
have cardiovascular issues, you have metabolic issues, you have immune, you have cognitive, behavioral, and mental health.
Okay, I
And
see.
so, I mean, you can divide it however you want, and I've changed over the years sort of how I bucket it out. But to
It
me,
is a neat way of kind of grouping them together.
where it's like you have as a psychologist, like sort of there's sort of the mind brain side, and then there's the peripheral body side.
Yeah,
I mean, and you have, I'm sure you could think of other domains too, but when you think of the heart, you're thinking of, in my mind, you're thinking of how you have blood pressure and heart rate dipping during the night to reduce the traffic on the road so that you're in the circulatory system, so that those cells and systems can repair, so that it can reduce strain and load, they can rest, but
yeah,
then they can also, it opens the door for things like the immune system to come in and repair some of those damaged blood vessels and things. So I mean, you have the heart, you have the metabolic issues, and that sort of brings in all of these energy related concepts of rest, but also hormones, and also energy utilization and all of that. And then you have the immune system, which is all about remodeling, rebuilding, repairing, and all of those important functions.
Yeah.
And then I think, on the brain side, you have cognitive health in terms of reaction time,
Yeah.
attention, memory, decision making, those sorts of cognitive functions. You have mental health, things like mood and emotions and stress and managing those things, which are related but different. And then you have behavioral health, which I sort of put in a separate bucket, which are things like how you live your life, what you eat, where you go, how you interact with people, all of these things that you do are also downstream of this. And if I were going to draw a picture of circles and arrows and how all these things are connected with each other, it would just be a big whole mess of
Right.
arrows because
Yeah.
all of these are all related to all of the other ones. And
Yeah.
so it's a very integrated system. And sleep is upstream of some of these processes, so that when you know, if you alter sleep, do you alter all of these? Yes.
Yeah. I will say, have you ever read the book Why We Sleep?
I know the book well. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. So I was actually recently reading through some of it, and there's one line that really stuck out to me, and it still kind of rings in my head. It's not a question of what sleep affects or what sleep does for you. It's a question of what sleep doesn't do for you, right? And that line really
Yeah.
stuck out to me a lot. It
Right. I
just
mean,
kind of stays in my
that's
head.
because, and the way I think about it is, it's because it's foundational. It's
Yeah.
like, no, you don't think, well, which cells in your body don't need oxygen?
Right.
Like, you don't think which cells in your body don't need fuel and energy. Like, you don't think about that
Yeah.
because that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's
Because
counterintuitive.
these
Yeah.
biological foundational requirements of food, air, water, they're universal. They're
Yeah.
things that are required, and sleep is one of those as well.
Yeah.
I mean, a great example is like if you if you tried to hold your breath, there's only so long you can take control and hold your breath as long as you can, and you
Yeah.
you can delay that breath. But you can only delay it so far because it's somewhat under your control, but it's not completely under your control and it's not optional. You can delay it, but you will get to the point where if you want to hold your breath, you might get to the point where you cannot hold your breath any longer. Not only that, if you are in a place where you consciously know that if I take a breath right now, I will die because I'm underwater, you know.
Right.
You can only go so far before your body's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like
That's
you
true.
I guess you're gonna have to die because I need to breathe.
Yeah.
I will override my survival instinct to take that breath, and that's how people drown,
Yeah.
or it's one of the ways that people drown. I
Right.
mean, and sleep is the same way. You can delay it, you can push it off, you can restrict it, and
Yeah.
have that degree of control, but it's not unlimited, and you can only go so far. And it will get to the point where you know consciously that if I fall asleep right now, I could die because I'm driving a car, whatever, doing
Yeah.
something dangerous. If you push it far enough, you will take that breath. You will
Yeah.
nod off.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show how absolutely essential it is for
Yeah.
functioning.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to ask about like another thing within this idea of the importance of sleep. So I believe you also study health disparities in
Yes.
sleep, right? So I wanted to ask about maybe some of your key findings in that research and how maybe socioeconomic classes or racial like groups, how that plays a
Yeah.
role in
Yeah,
sleep.
so sleep is sleep like eating is you're meeting a biological need by engaging in behaviors. And those behaviors are socially constructed and influenced by the environment and all kinds of other things, just like food is. Everyone needs to eat, but everyone has to afford food, make food. What are you eating? All of these sorts of things are determined by these factors.
Yeah.
And so disparities are very interesting to me because if we have a disparity in our ability to meet basic biological needs, it's going to create diversions in the population to
Right.
different outcomes
Yeah.
that aren't fair. So, like the difference between a difference and a disparity, like you can have groups that are different, and that's okay. But the difference between a difference and a disparity is a disparity has an element of injustice. A disparity isn't inevitable. A disparity is because we made it that way, not because it has to be that way.
Yeah.
So, like for example, men on average are taller than women are, I think. I don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I mean,
but I think that's true.
obviously. Yeah.
That's a difference. It's not
Yeah.
a disparity. It's not a, well, women are malnourished and that's why they are not as tall or something.
Right.
That would be a disparity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so this concept of disparities is interesting because here you have something that's really important to health, and you have certain groups in society that are systematically set up in one way or another to be less able to meet those needs.
Yeah.
And then they'd be more likely to experience a lot of those consequences. So you have a few different ways of looking at disparities. One you mentioned is socioeconomic.
Yeah.
Money doesn't buy you sleep. No one's been able to figure out that yet. This is why we have a lot of rich people who don't sleep very well.
Yeah.
Money can't buy you sleep, but money does buy certain things
Yeah.
that can buy you sleep. The biggest one is money buys you choices. It buys you choices of where you live. It buys you choices of how you get to work. It buys you choices of childcare, healthcare, job schedules, certain things that as opposed to having limited choices. Well,
Yeah.
I have to get up at 5 in the morning to take the bus because that's the only way I can afford to get into work, for example. Like money buys you choices. Money also buys you access. It buys you things like if you don't want to work a night shift, many people can buy their way out of that. Where, a
Yeah.
lot of people who work night shifts don't do it because they love working night shifts.
Right.
It's because, that's the job they can get. I mean, there are high earners who work night shifts. People like doctors and nurses work
Yeah.
night shifts.
Yeah.
But most people working night shifts are more socioeconomically disadvantaged. Um, Money buys you access to education. And education isn't just learning that sleep is important. It's education is getting a degree that can land you a better job,
Mm.
that might give
Yeah.
you more control over your own schedule, for
Yeah.
example. And so it's like, so money gives opportunities, but it also comes with burdens. So, for example, people who come from racial ethnic minority groups who are typically disadvantaged socioeconomically, when they earn more money, and there's data that shows that actually sometimes they're not sleeping quite as well because with that extra money comes extra burdens. Like, they may be more responsible for other family members and helping take care of stuff, for
Yeah.
example. Especially, immigrant families where the kids speak English, but the parents or grandparents don't. Someone's got to help translate for the insurance company or for the doctor's office or whatever. And so some of these added opportunities also come with added burdens. And so it's complicated. This is why, you see that poverty is associated with less sleep or more disturbed sleep. But also, there's plenty of people who make a lot of money who still also have less sleep and disturbed sleep for other reasons.
Yeah.
But at least they're different reasons. So there's a socioeconomic angle, but then there's also environments. So like people who are living in noisier, more
Right.
crowded environments,
Yeah.
they're less able to sleep as well. Then there's also racial ethnic differences in sleep that arise from a couple different ways. One might be cultural, where some cultures are more, have more nighttime activities than morning activities. Some cultures are built around sleeping together in a group versus
Or
sleeping
there's
alone.
also like siestas, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
the napping behavior and what is
Yeah.
normal can be different across cultures. And when you take someone from one culture where it's like siesta is a great example. If you take someone from a siesta culture where that's sort of a normal part of life, and
Yeah.
then you transplant them into
Oh,
like
yeah.
New York City
Right. Like a nine to
with,
five, like
right,
yeah.
like Were they wrong? No, they were never wrong.
Right.
Is the new system wrong? No, it's just a different system.
Yeah.
And when you take people from one cultural environment and transplant them in another somewhat incompatible one, you're going to have friction and you're going to
Yeah.
have some difficulties. So
Yeah.
that's an example of it just in a non-judgmental way. It's not like
Yeah.
one culture is better with sleep than another. I mean, you can say some of them have some healthier sleep habits, but it's not about that. It's about um, the dissonance between cultural values and that are functional and even sometimes even better in an environment that actually doesn't value sleep as well.
Yeah.
That might make things harder. But then there's also these interaction things like racism, structural racism, how people are treated. People aren't getting diagnosed and treated with sleep disorders the same way. People are systematically set up to be sleeping worse. I mean, so for example, you see black-white differences in being able to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep um, consistently for 40 plus years, for
Wow.
maybe 50 years, as far back as the data goes. You see this difference between the amount of people able to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Um, and actually, the data we recently published showed that for the first time in 50 years, over the past 10 years, that gap is no longer constant. It's changing. It is now widening and getting worse.
Wow.
It's worse now than it was 10 years
Actually, I
ago.
thought it would be getting reduced. That's actually
No, it's getting worse.
wow.
And
Yeah.
and the degree to which it's getting worse is actually accounted for by an increasing number of people getting less than 6 hours of sleep. It's not just a whole population trend different. There's a categorical shift to more people getting less than 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
By the way, when we did this analysis, there is one other group. So everyone was losing a little bit of sleep over the last 15 years on average. A
Okay.
little bit, not a lot. You're talking about a fraction of a minute per night per person. So
Okay.
it's
Wow. That is
almost
quite small.
immeasurable, but
Yeah.
it's adding up. So it's
Okay.
adding up to, you know, you're talking about if you're talking about a fraction of a minute per night, um, times 300 nights, that's how many hours per
Wow.
year of lost sleep you get,
Right.
times 10 years that
Yeah.
it's accumulating.
That's
So
all.
in
Yeah.
10 years, people are losing, in 15 years, people are losing 10, 15 minutes of sleep. So it's gradual and small, but observable and quantifiable. It's not dramatic, but it's also not nothing either. But there were two groups of people who were losing sleep faster than all the others. All of them were statistically about the same, but it was blacks and African Americans in the US who were losing sleep faster, and Mexican Americans were losing sleep faster. And that was notable because for many years, that was actually sort of the one group that seemed to be doing everything right, where they seemed to be the most protected group against sleep issues, where they seem to have the fewest amount of sleep issues.
Wow.
But it looks like in the past, like those data are now old because
Yeah.
when we track this over time, in the more recent years, that gap now no longer exists. Now they're sort of in with everybody else.
Yeah.
Um, what's happened over the past, but even that data is almost 10 years old now, and so it'll be interesting to see with all the changes post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Um,
That's true. That
so
is
like that's the thing, you have these societal changes that
yeah.
lead to stresses, that lead to changes on how people do things, that lead to difference in how people are treated, and all these things that people take into their bedroom at night when they're
Oh
alone
yeah.
with
That I
their
mean
own
that's the first thing
thoughts.
that comes to my mind when you're saying people are losing sleep. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Sleep is downstream of all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you have groups of people I mean, if what it, racial differences in sleep shouldn't exist because there's no biological reason why they should be different.
Right.
If you see a difference, it's probably driven by something social and environmental
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
because the biological differences between groups wouldn't explain it. There's more of biological variability within groups than between them. And the differences that are between them have nothing to do with sleep. Things like things like hair color, eye color, skin color, that doesn't have anything to do with sleep. It
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you have some things like, you know, some points of ancestry have like narrower airways, which might give you more sleep apnea symptoms at a lower BMI. But like
Right.
you see that sometimes, but in terms of sleep needs, there don't really seem to be those differences. And sleep ability also doesn't seem to be that different. It's more of the opportunity and the structural barriers that seem to differentiate between groups.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I didn't actually realize that you were able to do that project and analysis. I did not expect those results. So
Yeah, yeah, we
yeah.
didn't either actually.
Yeah.
So most of the data that had come out that had tracked sleep over time was using time use survey data, and they've shown no difference over time, even going back, maybe 100 years. And so I actually expected that that's what we were going to find.
Yeah.
But we had a sample that was big enough. It was tens and tens of thousands of people where data was collected each year, but it wasn't from the same people. It was just from a representative population of the sample, a representative sample of the population every year for the past, about 15 years of data we looked. And we were able to map it out and show that on average, this is how much sleep people were losing. And one of the reasons why it's been hard to detect was you needed a ton of resolution to see it,
Right. Oh
where
yeah. I mean, when
because
you're
because
that like
it's
yeah.
small, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
but it's building, but it's cumulative.
Yeah.
Like it's the continents are moving slowly, but
Yeah,
they're
that's true,
moving.
but they are moving. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're not moving in the right direction, but more importantly, there were some groups that were losing sleep faster. And the other thing we found in that study was we looked at population level changes in chronic diseases like obesity and prediabetes and
Yeah.
high blood pressure. And what we found was the population level changes in those were partially explained by those
Wow.
small population changes in sleep.
Yeah.
When you
Wow.
talk, this is a thing that public health people talk about called the law of large numbers, where small things in a million people are big deals.
Yeah.
So like this is like the daylight savings time thing. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
where you see increases in hospital admissions and heart attacks around daylight savings because, the risk time for having a heart attack, a lot of people don't realize is morning. The morning and early and late morning, because when you go from sleep to wake, your blood pressure and heart rate shoot up from the sleep mode to the wake mode.
Yeah.
And that transition can be stressful. And when you disrupt that by changing things, it disrupts it a little bit. And
Yeah.
everyone does that when they jet lag themselves and change time zones. It's just a small little thing. But when hundreds of millions of people are jet lagging themselves on purpose for no good reason all at the same time, a
Yeah.
small fraction of those people who were on the edge of health, it tips over.
Right.
And they would have anyway, like if they were changing times. It's just, it was all happening all at once. And so a fraction of a percent is still a lot of people,
Yeah. When you
you
have
know?
like that many, like 100 million people, that fraction is going to be
Exactly.
quite a few.
Right. I mean, if I were one of those people and I didn't have to have a heart attack, except some politician decided to make a law that everyone's going to change the clocks
Right.
for no good reason, and I died because of that policy, I'd be pretty mad, you
Yeah.
know? And if I were that person's family and say, like, look, this family member probably wouldn't have died if we just did away with the stupid policy.
Yeah.
Like, yes, they are one out of 100 million people where this happened, but you
Yeah.
know, how many like is how many unnecessary bad events is necessary? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing with this, where a very small change can produce a big effect if what we're looking at is big enough. So like if
Yeah.
you're dealing with, if the population changes a certain amount, is some of that due to changes in sleep? So we did something similarly over the pandemic where we looked at Fitbit data. And
Oh,
what we
wow.
showed
Okay.
was when people stayed home, even with all the stress going on in the world, first of all, average resting heart rate fell slightly
Okay.
instead of rose. And in the first several months of the pandemic before everything sort of opened up. During that time, actually, average resting heart rate um, actually fell slightly.
Yeah.
And on average, people slept about 8 minutes more because they didn't have to wake up to go to work every day. So they slept
Yeah.
in a little bit.
Yeah.
Weekday, weekend differences started disappearing. Um,
Oh,
and
and
the
social jet
increase,
lag.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
increase in regularity, and the slight increase in total sleep time. No one would say 5 to 10 minutes really mattered.
Right.
But when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of people, it explained that difference in the resting heart rate
Yeah.
where the degree of the change in resting heart rate was correlated with whether you slept a little bit more.
Yeah.
So even a few more minutes can make a measurable difference. It might not be noticeable to you, but you multiply it by a
Yeah.
population,
Millions. I mean,
you
yeah.
have a huge shift. This is the thing that people have a hard time wrapping their head around,
Yeah.
where it's like, what is a few beats per minute of heart rate? Nothing. But you
Yeah.
multiply that by 1,000 people, where
Yeah.
some of those people might have been on the edge of having an issue.
Right.
And for them, it mattered. For you, maybe it doesn't. But you know, this is something I've had to wrap myself around as a clinician who treats patients one at a time. And if a
Yeah.
patient changed their heart rate by 3 beats, 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 beats per minute, well, 20 is big. But
Yeah. 20 years.
if they change their resting heart rate a few beats per minute, I
Right.
wouldn't even notice.
Right.
But if the population
Yeah.
changes their resting heart rate,
Yeah.
it changes healthcare utilization on a
Yeah.
big scale. Like it's just interesting, and sleep is just universal.
Yeah.
Sleep unites. Just
Yeah.
think about it. Every person, everywhere,
Yeah.
through all of history, to prehistory, to the ancestors before humans even existed,
Yeah.
slept every night. It
Yeah.
didn't matter whether you were fighting in the Peloponnesian Wars or in World War II or lived at the North Pole or were
Yeah.
crossing the Bering Strait
Yeah.
or were fighting in the Crusades or were just living a normal life pre-electricity, post-electricity,
Yeah.
pre-farming, post-farming.
Yeah.
Like every single one of those people
Yeah.
had to go to sleep
Yeah.
every day. Some people skipped some of the days, but by
Yeah.
and large, pretty much everyone has slept pretty much every day of their life. And and this is something that this is what I mean by it's universal. It's not like a thing we do because we enjoy it and it's good for you. It's a thing that unites everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're living on a quiet suburban street or you're in a war zone. Like you have to sleep tonight and you
Yeah.
have to find a safe place to do it. And if you sleep well, that will set you up for a better tomorrow. And if you don't sleep well, well, you're gonna be less set up well for a better tomorrow.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, I that's so cool, the Fitbit like data, like the
Yeah.
way that you were able to do that research and find those small differences in so many people. I mean, I've never heard anything like it on this channel. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just sort of it's about the scale.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you can make big changes in one person at a time, or you can make small changes a million people at a time and have and make an impact where you can. That was what I learned from that paper that came out as a graduate, because most of the work I did in grad school was clinical trials. You know,
Okay.
doing treatments. We were like my first project as a grad student was on a clinical trial of using bright light therapy for depression.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
this was one person at a time. And then there was a group at a time because it was a study. It was, but then this paper came out. It was a study of over 1 million people.
Wow.
And to this day, it's still the largest, sleep and longevity study I think that's ever been done.
Oh.
And so I remember asking my advisor, like, why do this? I thought you were interested mostly in laboratory studies and clinical trials with smaller numbers or moderate sized numbers. And he's like, some questions you can't ask that way. Some questions you can only ask at the population level, and you can only see these things at a there's no way to do this study in a laboratory. You can't
Yeah,
take
that's
enough
true.
people to follow them for enough time
Yeah.
to see. But our job is to do the most good we can with whatever tools we can to help as many people as possible
Yeah.
with whatever we've got. And if this is the tool for this question, then we do our best.
Yeah. I will say, I've actually been talking a lot about, or I mean, a lot of people mention like wearables and the increased use of them.
Yeah.
And we actually talked about how like that data might be very interesting to see like over the next couple years. And
Yeah.
that kind of leads me into my final question with you here.
Sure.
So in the next 5 to 10 years, like what kind of like interventions, research studies, like where do you see like the field of sleep going? Like where's the
Yeah.
focus? What needs to be done?
Yeah. I mean, so the biggest question in the sleep field right now, and I'll get to wearables in a minute,
Okay, yeah.
but the biggest question I think the sleep field is facing right now is what is sleep need and how do you measure it? Because when someone says, how much sleep do I need? First of all, they don't know what they're asking. Are they asking how much sleep what is the minimum amount of sleep I need to get on an average basis to perform at my best? Or are they asking how much sleep do I need to get on average on over time to not die or not have horrible things happen or to
Yeah.
optimize my cognitive function or to optimize my immune system or to make my relationships better? Like, what do you mean by need? Need for what?
Yeah.
And then how would we measure such a thing? We're not really good at measuring need. We're good at measuring ability, and we're good at measuring what you can get, and we can measure
Yeah.
your opportunity, but we're not
Yeah.
very good at measuring need. Um, and so wearables can potentially help with that,
Yeah.
like because you can gather data on enough people now. Like, so I remember. So my graduate advisor, Dan Kripke, who was the one who did that mortality study, he also did most of the first studies using wearables
Oh,
back in the
wow.
70s and 80s.
Wow. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he like the very first algorithm for scoring wrist-based sleep stuff was I think it was 1982 was when they published that paper.
Wow.
Like this is old technology. So I academically grew up all around, which is why I do all this wearable stuff because to me,
Yeah.
like it's just sort of a natural progression. It's just cool to see like, oh, this thing that we were playing around with in the lab for all these years that no one really believed was legit because sleep doesn't exist on your wrist. Like it's a brain. How can something on your wrist measure something in your brain?
Yeah.
Like now people are able to understand that like actually you can do this
Yeah.
and you can do it at scale
Yeah. The
and
scale is really
answer
the coolest
all
part.
kinds of cool
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
And but we have to change our questions. And like we can't just ask small questions and more people. Like we can ask different kinds of questions. And I think that's really where the field is going to be going
Yeah.
in terms of understanding how sleep is connected to things that we haven't even really thought of.
Yeah.
But then from an intervention standpoint, I mean, I think the future is really going to be about how do we leverage the ability to sleep we naturally have and remove some of those barriers. So, for example, a lot of people don't realize that the most effective treatment for insomnia is not any medication, it's CBTI. It's a behavioral therapy, a
Oh, yeah.
cognitive behavior therapy. It's been around for decades and it outperforms every medication that's ever been on the market, especially when you compare them, when you compare the data.
Yeah.
Because most people don't know that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work 100% of the time. And one of the times when CBTI does not work, it's when your natural ability to generate, when you have like brain damage or when your ability to control sleep wake regulation is damaged. But for most people, it works just fine. Even if you have things like chronic pain, even if you're sick, even if, you have anxiety, no matter what, you can usually make your insomnia a lot better because the way that therapy works is it recognizes that your ability to sleep is not is not something you need to learn. You were born able to sleep. You were sleeping before you were born. No one had
Yeah.
to teach you.
Yeah.
It's just like when someone comes in and says they're having trouble sleeping, it's like they're saying they're having trouble breathing. It's not that like, man, you suck at breathing. Someone should teach you how to do it one of these days. You've been able to breathe your whole life. Why
Yeah.
can't you now? What's in the way? What's preventing your body from doing the thing it's perfectly capable of doing and should know how to do? Do you have lung disease? Do you have airway inflammation? Like, is your chemical sensing of CO2 thrown off? Is your neuromuscular control? What's preventing your body from doing the thing it should be able to do perfectly fine? You should be able to breathe. Like you were built able to breathe. You didn't have to
Yeah.
learn it. So why can't you? It's the same thing with sleep. You were built able to sleep. You
Yeah.
were born able to sleep. No one had to teach you to sleep. Why can't you? What's interfering with that? And when you eliminate whatever that is, then you just get out of your own way.
Yeah.
And often the treatment, like over the decades, what the data has shown is The thing that is mostly in our way when we're having trouble sleeping, if it's not some physical barrier, if like the lung example, if it's not lung disease, if
Right.
it's not a
Like,
sleep disorder like sleep
yeah,
apnea or
that's what I was
something
thinking. Yeah.
physically in the way that you can then sort of ameliorate. For insomnia, most of the time it's us. We're in our own way. It's our own expectations and worries about not sleeping. It's like sleep becomes
Yeah.
predictably stressful for some
Yeah.
reason, but then that predictable stress becomes the activation that keeps us up at night. And so it becomes a cycle where we're stressed about not sleeping. So then we're stressed when we get into bed. So then we don't sleep, which then strengthens the connection between not sleeping and stress. So then we get into bed and that connection is ready to go. So then we don't sleep because we're stressed, which then reinforces that connection. And
Yeah.
actually, the solution is just break that connection between not being able to, being in bed and not being able to sleep. And the rest of it can often take care of itself. We just get out of our own way. And so, in terms of technology for the future, I think technology that can leverage that, that
Yeah.
can leverage people's natural ability to sleep and help us get out of our own way will help.
Yeah. Well, um, on that note, thank you so much today for joining me. I think we had a really great conversation, and the research you've done is super cool. And I'm glad to I'm glad that you're able to explain it. And this is definitely something that will be in my head now. And I'm
Awesome.
hoping to do like sleep research and advocacy in college. So
Very
I'll
cool.
definitely like keep some of the ideas that we talked about today in mind.
Yeah,
So
and keep in touch. The sleep community, we're all pretty
yeah,
well connected to each other, and we all
yeah,
try and support each other because we all, even though the sleep field is unique in that it's very multidisciplinary. You go to a
yeah,
sleep conference, you get psychologists, pediatricians, neurologists,
yeah,
pulmonary, dreams people, occupational therapy, physical, like you get people from all different places come together to talk about a thing that connects everybody. And so yeah, no, I encourage anyone who wants to go into this field. There's tons of opportunity.
yeah,
You just need to find it. There are many ways in. Just find one.
yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.